Okay, recording. A couple years ago, when everybody had to go to remote, we did a conference, um, and it was all remote. And one of the things we tried to do is have a trivia game with remote, and it kept every time someone would log in and log back out, that Zoom voice would go recording in progress, recording. So it ended up being kind of hilarious, like, as hilarious as a Zoom conference can be. But it was, that sound became like the the anxiety sound of the game. It was kind of fun. Anyway.
Well, I realize that I say, "Are you serious?" a lot, and I say that a lot, and then every time my Siri
Siri.
thinks that I'm calling her, so I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah.
like shut up,
Yeah.
Siri."
Did everybody else's phones just go off when she said that? My Siri just started.
It did?
Yeah. We must
Oh
have
my
similar
God.
voice imprints. Oh,
That is so funny. Wow. All
all
right.
right. Holly is joining us.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
take
So,
over the world.
yeah, right. Let's see. So I think we are about ready to get started. It's 12:30. Christina is on the line. She is from Axxess. She'll be our presenter today. But I just want to welcome you all to today's webinar, Mastering Marketing Growth Strategies for Business Success. Sean. We're excited to have you all here today. If you're a member joining us for the first time, we appreciate your time and your participation. We believe this session will provide valuable insights to your organization to help you grow and thrive. Today's topic is about mastering key strategies for business development in our rapidly growing care home industry, from developing compelling value propositions to establishing strong organizational brand. Christina Andrews is going to guide us through actionable steps for scaling our business. We're going to cover sales territory management, achieving optimal sales outcome, and cultivating effective business development leaders. So Christina Andrews is the Director of Professional Services at Axxess, one of our wonderful business members here at the Alliance. Christina's got extensive experience helping home health, home care, and hospice and palliative care organizations use technology and strategies to scale their operations. Yeah, I am reading it, but I do know this stuff and it's good stuff. Our webinar is being recorded. And I will share it with you, and afterwards feel free to revisit the content with your team. For our engaged members, thank you again for coming. For any non-members on the line, I encourage you to explore our benefits and reach out. Give me an email, shoot me a message in the chat, and we'll connect after the call. And we can talk about membership and how we can help you achieve your business goals. So without further ado, Christina, you'd like to get us started?
All right, awesome. Thank you, Leslie, and welcome everyone to our conversation today. I really want this to be engaging, so please don't hesitate to raise your hand, take yourself off of mute, throughout our 1 hour journey together. But just to set the tone, I have had the opportunity to serve in many different markets within the care at home industry throughout my tenure. And prior to joining Axxess, I worked with an organization at the time called Simeone, which is now called Symmetry. And one of the roles that I held while with that organization was within the growth solutions component. So really focused on how to help an organization position themselves for greater market growth and success. But prior to joining Simeone, I was with a national organization called Heartland Home Health and Hospice, HCR Manor Care, but now owned by Gentiva. And I had the wonderful opportunity serving the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware markets. And so my role there was leaning in and supporting all of the organizations with their overall growth success for home health, for home care, for hospice, as well as infusion, in addition to palliative care. So what I'm bringing to the table today is a mixture of experience and best practices based upon my time within industry, and also now my time within the role of technology and how technology helps organizations position themselves for greater success. So thank you, Leslie, for the introduction. And let's go ahead and get started. Now, really, I want to provide actionable insights to help each of you think about your organizational brand and how that brand is positioned to foster customer loyalty, as well as enhancing your overall value proposition. And really, when we think about business growth, every one of us brands the organization in which we are supporting. And so we need to understand the importance of our leadership and how we can help to influence that overall business development. And ultimately, how do we align every single one of our teams within the organization to the overall company's goals and values? And I'm sure some of you have heard this analogy of the three-legged stool. Well, I like to refer to it as the four-legged stool. So when we think about a care at home organization, operations, clinical, your back office support, in addition to your marketing and sales team. And so how are all of those individuals aligned with the overall goals and values and objectives to meet that market share growth as well as penetration? So really the best practices today, I truly hope will provide some insight, maybe bring something that you have used in your past back to the forefront, and or something that you haven't used that you'll implement into your overall strategy as you launch into 2025. So this is where I like to say the best tactics, for business development should be placed within 4 key categories. And this is to help us ensure that we have a method that's simple enough to control, simple enough to also measure, and allows us to remain focused. Because I have been in that seat to where I've had analysis paralysis because I've had so much that oh, this is great. Oh, I should try this. I should do this. And so that analysis paralysis hindered, opportunity for growth within certain areas. And so, I like to just present it in this very controlled, concise strategy. So, first is overall market growth. And when I think about market growth, there's 2 things that is very top of mind to me. It's really about the value proposition that we're going to talk about here shortly, but also about business insights. So data, so those 2 things combined should really position an organization for greater success. The second area is branding and messaging. So this is really where brand identity comes into play. Who are you? What is your organization? What are the characteristics, the specific strengths and features of your organization? What does that look like? There's multiple conversations that has been held most recently within our landscape that we cannot continue to operate and look the same today as we need to look and operate into the future. Some might have heard the analogy of, I would love for my hospice or home health organization to look like the Chick-fil-A. Every Chick-fil-A you go to has the same consistent customer experience. Now, I'm not saying that adopting aspects of the Chick-fil-A brand into your identity is good or bad, but what I'm saying here is that your brand needs to be very unique to who you are and who the customers you serve are. So we're going to talk about that. And that's really where the messaging by personas will come into play. And personas can look differently. It can look like a granddaughter, a daughter, a patient, a resident, a hospital system, a physician, a skilled nursing facility. So that's what I mean by the term persona, because it's a unique entity. The third bucket is cultivating a growth team. Now, as I mentioned, we are all part of sales. We're all part of marketing. We are all part of branding our organization as the referral partner of choice, branding the organization as the referral partner of choice. And that's the difference between hiring an ambassador versus an employee. And we're going to talk about that here in just a moment too. So when I think about that growth team, that mindset, that 4-legged stool, this is where everyone needs to align, and they all need to understand the overarching goal and the objectives to get there. And so coaching and mentoring is extremely important. And how you cross-pollinate that coaching and mentoring can either create greater success or it can hinder it. And then last but not least, achieving the desired outcomes. And so this is really where techniques and concepts truly come into play as it relates to those desired outcomes. So today is not going to be your traditional sales training and or marketing or branding training. I'm really going to stay in line with these 4 specific key areas. But if any of you, based upon today's conversation, wants to have a more in-depth conversation of specific sales training, I am happy to recommend partners of choice and help to facilitate that connection for additional training. So, all right. So when we think about overall business development, this is really where we also need to consider barriers to success. And so what do I mean by barriers to success? First is strategy. Does your organization have a precise strategy of how you want to grow based upon your brand identity? And so this is really where I have found in my past and helping to serve and support care at home industries that there is an imprecise strategy and a disconnect from one team to another. And what I mean by that is value propositions. So do we truly have a defined value proposition for your organization? So your strengths, what do you offer per customer or per segment? So that's really where needs-based selling comes into play. I'm sure some of you have heard this statement utilized, but what's in it for me, right? So you're selling benefits and not the specific features. And that needs to be based upon community. So this is where I found that imprecise strategy comes into play because we're not really selling to the community. We're just selling the traditional home health or the traditional hospice organization. What we have found is that human nature truly dictates the fact that we want to know how something is going to benefit us, right? Not the feature, but how is it really going to benefit us? And so that's where that precise strategy really comes into play. So when we think about the business insights and the data component, lack of critical data can also be a hindrance to success. And so we're going to talk a little bit about third-party data and how we use that third-party data to help create your brand identity by conducting a proper needs assessment. And within that needs assessment, looking at the specificity of demographics, looking at the specificity of diagnosis, looking at the specificity of the referral partner, in addition to your competition. So that business insight really helps to paint that SWOT analysis picture on how you need to pivot and or create the foundation for the next steps for growth. While enhancing, your overall patient outcome experience, because ultimately that data from a quadruple aim perspective, that really can also help to bolster your market growth because of how you position that specific branding and or messaging. And so once you've created, those elements, those components, it will allow you to construct specific key messaging that you want to convey based upon those personas. As I mentioned with cultivating the growth team, ambassadors versus employee, I also have found working alongside of organizations, lack of role definition. And not meaning that, if I hire you as a clinical liaison, or if I hire you as a sales rep, or if I hire you as an account executive, I'm not meaning that type of role definition. And what I mean by role definition is how is that individual serving your marketing and growth strategy? And so we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then last but not least, coaching and mentoring, as I talked about just a moment ago. When we think about coaching and mentoring, there's kind of a sweet spot for the time that we need to spend on coaching and mentoring. And so the best practice that really comes with a form of success is around 50 to 75%. So, coaching and mentoring, that overall growth strategy needs to have a very intense focus and purposeful focus. So now let's talk a little bit about value propositions. This might be an interesting connection for you, but I really took a step back while I was in consulting to think about value propositions in a different way. And how I like to correlate it today is value propositions can also be seen as your thought leadership. As you see here, value propositions doesn't have the hyphen next to donuts or cookies or a piece of collateral, right? I have it partnered with thought leadership. And that is very intentional, because if you ask yourself, is your organization focused on educating, or is it focused on solving problems? So when we think about thought leadership, within thought leadership, we are providing education that truly helps to solve for problems. The other question is are we focused on building referrals? I just need the referrals. I just need the market share growth. I just need the market penetration. Or are we focused on building relationships? And when we think about a relationship, and when we think about, purchasing something, buying something, are we purchasing or buying something or selecting that element because we like it or because we trust it? Yes, like can be a foundation that then eventually leads into trust, but how do we create the trust? And we do so through our thought leadership, right? So it's not about donuts, not about trinkets, because all of those papers and stuff, they just get pushed aside. So we want each of your team members to understand that the key strengths of your organization, the logical reason why someone should refer a patient to your organization versus another organization down the road, is truly tied to your value proposition, your thought leadership, how you are serving your community at large. And so here are some statistics. So 63% of individuals who took the survey, they said that understanding, how an organization can solve for specific business challenges was extremely important to them. So how is your home health, your home care, your hospice organization solving for that entity's specific business challenges? Maybe it's rehospitalization rates. Maybe it's the fact that they're having staffing issues. Maybe they're getting ready to have joint survey come through, or their accrediting body come through. Maybe they have challenges with overall star ratings or customer surveys and feedback. So when we think about those specific business challenges, that's really where your value prop and your thought leadership can paint the picture, for your stakeholders to say, choose us and trust us because this is why. 64% of the individuals indicated that value propositions and thought leaderships, if articulated correctly, challenges their way of thinking. And that's essential, right? Because when we are doing our job, we wake up every morning, we have a task to complete, a role to conduct, functions to check off our list. We need sometimes to be challenged in a way that makes us say, you know what? I never thought about it that way. So challenging thinking through value propositions and thought leadership is essential for stakeholders because it motivates them to take specific action. So it significantly can also change the perception of your company, which is interesting, right? So now you're not seen as the organization who just wants the referrals. Now you are seen as the organization who is truly solving for pain points through your unique strengths because you've positioned it as a value proposition that's tied into thought leadership, because you are the organization of choice through your education. So when we think about your value proposition and thought leadership, it's not just about the messaging that you conduct in person, right? But it's also about the messaging that you conduct, whether that's through collateral, yes, or a blog, social media posts. How are you using Facebook? How are you using LinkedIn? How are you using Instagram to promote your thought leadership, your value propositions, the strength of your organization, and how you are solving for your community at large? Here in Wilmington, North Carolina, I follow two primary care at home organizations intentionally. And I like their posts as they come through, because I'm always wanting to see what are they doing from a value prop, a thought leadership position to help support the community at large. Most recently, one of those local organizations conducted a 3-hour educational session on grief. The first thing that came to mind was like, wow, who can sit through a 3-hour educational session on grief? I don't know. Like, I mean, can I? I mean, I've been in hospice since knee high to a grasshopper. Maybe I could. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that session, but I did connect with an individual at a wine dinner who attended that session, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, tell me about it. Tell me about what you experienced." And so she kicked it off by introducing the fact that they had invited a lawyer to talk about the dying process within the state of North Carolina and some of the barriers to the way that individuals would like to pass within North Carolina. And I'm not going to go into all of the details, but she had me at hello. As soon as she was telling me about this thought leadership, how this organization positioned their value prop within the dying process, and our conversation with this lawyer, I would not have been bored. I would have been highly engaged, probably taking a lot of notes. And so she went on to tell me more and more about the agenda. And I'm like, that organization is doing it right. They have positioned themselves, their thought leadership, their strengths, and how they're supporting the community at large. And this is why they're able to grow their market share. This is why they're able to grow their market penetration, because the community trusts them. They trust them. All right. So next, business insights. I love data. Love data. I love geeking out to data. And so I know this slide looks a little busy. So I'm going to walk us through it. But first and foremost, why business insight? Well, the reason behind that is because accountability actually is very empowering, right? Accountability is very empowering. I know maybe some of you are like, well, I don't know, I don't really like to be held accountable. But from a growth perspective, when we see the numbers, the percentages, showing that upward trend, our revenue showing that upward trend, the margins showing an upward trend, that accountability is empowering, and it allows us to invest back into our organizations from multiple different perspectives. So an organization's ability to build, to maintain, and to protect relationships that they have cultivated is essential, right? And so business insights will enable organizations to identify ways to build, to maintain, and to protect those cultivated partnerships. because it's providing you with fast and accurate reporting, right? It gives you insight that you don't really have necessarily when you're on the street, right? When you're out there in person. It's kind of the why behind it. It also provides you with a competitive analysis of what's going on with your marketplace. You know, looking at overall customer satisfaction. I mean, how many times did I log into Care Compare, Medicare.gov, and look at my competition within the Pennsylvania market, right? Within the Delaware market, within the New Jersey market. I wanted to see what the customers were saying about my competition, in addition to the third-party data that I had access to. Because that third-party data, in addition to my internal data, allowed for me to put together my market trends. And based upon those market trends, I was able to create operational efficiencies, not only for my internal sales team, but also for my external sales team. And that allowed us to achieve great success with an overall revenue because we were making accurate decisions. And so this is really where I like to use the term management to scale, right? Management to scale, because business insights should do exactly that for your company, for your organization. By utilizing that internal data and the external data, putting together that market trend to create the efficiency so you can execute it. Because you are conducting a strategy that is built upon informed decisions based upon needs and based upon evidence. It's not based upon, this is what we think works because the spaghetti is sticking to the wall. But it's truly insights that enable you to work at a very optimized a way. However, I would say with business insights, there's some technique that's involved. The ability to mesh this data together to create that competitive analysis, to really think about how you're positioning the data for your internal and external experience also is extremely helpful if you're experienced within analyzing data. But also, there are organizations and there's third-party organizations that really help companies such as yours put together insights that will provide that technology enhanced growth. So I would encourage you, if you're using just internal reports from your EMR and Care Compare or Medicare.gov, to consider what your third-party options potentially could look like for your organization to really give you that deep down analysis of your market being served. So you can look at what you need to do for penetration as well as share growth. All right. So next, effective brand development. So this is a very unique strategy that can be a role or a function of your sales manager, of your administrator, maybe even your office manager. But it does take a very unique background and degree and or individual to ensure that it's effective. Because your brand development in essence is the foundation of your culture and of your value proposition. So when I thought about how to, at a very high level, talk about brand development, because this could be a whole course, even a couple days worth of a workshop, this is how I've positioned it for our conversation today. So really, it's starting with research and analysis. Conducting that thorough research on your target audience, your target personas, your competition, and your market trends. So this is where I had mentioned, looking at third-party data so you can have the Medicare claims by persona. by referral partner, your hospital, your physician, your skilled nursing facility, your home health partner or your hospice partner down the road. This will really help you to assess, not only the gap related to care delivery, but also the uniqueness of what you could potentially build for care delivery. So for example, and even in your EMR too, so I don't want to discount the reports that an EMR provides. But when I think about gap in care delivery, you can look at when a patient has been referred to a home health or hospice organization, when that patient was actually admitted into that organization, and what that gap of time to admission looks like. Was it days? Was it weeks? Maybe it was even months. So then you can really think about, what needs to be different about your referral to admission process based upon that time to admission component. The other element, when researching your target personas, your audience, you can also look at the specificity of diagnosis. And so when you look at your community at large, do you see that you have hospitals who are supporting, COPD, or maybe it's CHF, maybe it's diabetes, or, maybe it's cancer. So thinking about the top diagnoses based upon that third-party claims data and or within your EMR, you can take a step back and look at your service delivery. So what type of service delivery do you offer? And I don't mean just, your standard admission or your standard therapy, but maybe there's an opportunity for you to create a CHF program or a program that's focused on end-of-life care for brain cancer, or a program that's focused on, how to minimize rehospitalizations with COPD population. So you really get to think about your service delivery arms based upon the specificity of diagnosis within your community served. So then you can back that into your strength, which ultimately becomes the value proposition that you get to brand develop. So this helps you really to understand the landscape, again, at a very high level, of the opportunities that creates the differentiator for you. Because ultimately you want to be the referral partner of choice. What makes your care delivery brand different from the brands down the street? So now that you've done your research, again, this could be like a 2-day workshop on your EMR data and your third-party data. Now you get to define your brand identity. You get to establish a very clear, concise purpose or vision that aligns with your mission and values. Now, I can tell you, since the pandemic, many care at home organizations went back to restart and they looked at their overall mission statement and their vision statement. How does it align with today's environment? And they took time to recreate their brand. They took time to do that research and think about how that research needed to elevate their brand from a vision and mission perspective. And I don't want to get too far off the soapbox here, but the reason why, when you think about redefining your mission and or your vision, it is to better position you as the referral partner of choice, but it can also position you as the employer of choice, right? Because then your vision and mission aligns with the ambassadors that we're going to talk about here in a moment that you are going to hire into your organization. Again, your vision and mission needs to be very specific for your care service, your brand entity, your brand identity. So once you've defined your brand, now it's all about positioning. And so that entails a very specific strategy that is both formal and informal, as well as a social component. So that's going to create a very distinct perception of your brand identity for your customers, differentiating your brand from the competition. And so positioning needs to be very, very unique for the persona. So how you message in person to a hospital system is going to be completely different than how you message in person to a skilled nursing facility. And the same is very true about social. So how you're positioning your thought leadership, your brand identity, your value proposition to a hospital system on Facebook and or Instagram or on LinkedIn is very different than how you're going to position it for a skilled nursing facility. The organization that I talked about just a few moments ago, their number one persona is the community. That's a very broad persona, right? So when they position on social, it is all about the community. So how are they pulling at the heartstrings of the community, solving for their pain points based upon their research and saying, yes, I want to sign up for a 3-hour grief education. So positioning. So next is crafting your brand story. And this is where, I love my marketing partners in crime, because this is really where we get to geek out with verbiage, because this is the compelling story that resonates and communicates your brand with your mission and your vision that positions your value prop, that allows them to emotionally connect with your brand. Just as I said a moment ago, pulling at your heartstrings, right? So how do you create that that unique experience through a brand story? And so this is why at the beginning of the conversation, I said, sometimes it does take a very unique individual. I might have some marketing experience, but I didn't go to school for that formal marketing degree. And so when I get with my marketing colleagues, how they take Christina-isms and they put it into a very unique story, I'm like, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. And so it can be a lot of fun creating that brand story that really helps to create that emotional connection with your customers. So this is where I talked a little too about the visual and the verbal component. So it's, that formal, that informal, that social. So again, how do your colors, right? How does your logo, how does the typography, how does all of that connect with your brand? And there are people that are very sensitive, right, to letter, to font, to colors. Even more so, I found out the other day that if you're doing education on your cell phone and it's speaking to you after a study, most prefer a female voice over a male voice. And it's not just because of, preference, it's more so because of the tone. We're able to hear a female's voice better than we do a male's voice. So when we think about that visual and verbal identity, there's a lot of strategy that needs to be put into play to create that very unique and recognizable, cohesive brand image that aligns with your overall identity. Then you also have your brand experience. And so this is really where you focus on ensuring that you have a memorable experience at every touch point, with your customer, with your end customer, related to the overall quality of your organization, the product of your organization, the overall user experience. And yes, we can do so through the unique surveys, that we all are held to within the care at home industry. But you can also do that by unique survey of your partner, that persona. So if you haven't incorporated an actual survey to your referral partner on your brand identity, on your value proposition, on your thought leadership, I would encourage you to do so. Back in the day, we would call this the referral partner report card. So we identified specific questions that was easy to answer, very concise questions, some with a yes or no, and some with a scale, like a 1 to 5 scale. So in essence, our referral partners were able to survey us and how we are meeting the needs through our brand identity and what we can do differently. So think about in a unique way that you can assess your brand experience outside of your customer surveys, patient satisfaction, bereaved surveys. And so this will enable you to engage your community at large in a much more strategic way, so you can continue to build on that foundation to create even a stronger relationship with your referral partners. And it will also allow you to elevate more of that social component, because now you're more confident with your brand development because you've taken it through this journey. You've gotten feedback on the experience. And so social, I mean, you really only get one time on social, right? To make it or break it. I know we say that in hospice too. You only get one time to create that unique experience. But the same is also said for social media. The other thing I would say too about your brand development is to be consistent with it. So if you are considering going back and doing a reset with your mission and vision, once you've established what your brand identity needs to look like moving forward, to be consistent with that. You don't want it to become cumbersome or confusing for the community. I've worked with 2 very large organizations, one in North Carolina and one in Florida, who flipped the script on their brand identity. And it's not something that happens overnight. This is something that happens over a very long sales cycle, typically over a year. If you're only going to make some tweaks to your brand development because you want to go back and revisit your research to see how it's defining you into the future, so you can position your social content as well as your in-person, I mean, I think that's brilliant. So I'm not saying not to tweak it, but if you're going to do a complete reset, just make sure that once you've done that, you're just going to be consistent with your brand, because that's going to help you to build that trust and recognition over time. Then, monitor and adapt, so constantly monitor your brand's performance. This directly correlates to referral volume. This directly correlates to your admission conversion. This directly correlates to overall margin. This directly correlates to the market share percentage for your organization based upon the competition. This also can be monitored and measured through overall penetration. And what I mean by penetration, think about a hospital system. So, instead of just getting referrals from, I guess I would, like from your COPD social worker, now you're getting referrals from the ED social worker. So that's what I mean by penetration. It's not just from one floor within the hospital or one unique diagnosis. It's from multiple different floors. And it also could expand out to the physician practices that are associated with that hospital system. That's also considered penetration. Then last but not least, as it relates to brand development, I would say employee advocacy. That's also going to be extremely important. So how you encourage your employees to be brand ambassadors, and their genuine support for the promotion of your uniqueness is also going to be key. Again, whether that's colors, whether it's uniforms, whether it's, the car wraps, but really it's about the value proposition, right? It's about that thought leadership. Are you able to walk up to everyone within the organization and say, what are the top 3 strengths that we provide to our community at large? What are the unique care services that we offer to our community at large? How do we differ from ABC, home health, or hospice down the street? That's what I mean by employee advocacy. So yes, it is about that visual look and feel, but it's also about that social component to ensure that you're growing through more of an organic perspective, because that brand is significantly identifiable. All right, so now communication. So when you think about communication, and I mentioned quite a bit of this on the last slide, I think this visual really helps us to put it more into perspective. So you've got your formal, right, which is your website, your email, if you have email campaigns that you send to your referral partners, your branded clothing, as I had mentioned, but then you also have that informal, right? To where you have that in-person communication, you have the networking events that you attend, conferences that you also, whether it's the state conference, the state association conferences, or if you attend national conferences. But then you also have that social media that floats in between the two halves. And so this is really where, going back to that last slide, that you have to have that employee advocacy, your employees truly bought into your brand, because website, right? If you change your brand identity, you change your thought, you add a thought leadership, you elevate a value prop, you have control over that, right? You have control over being able to make those tweaks within that formal component. To whereas the informal component, you don't really have control over, right? It's like me walking into a grocery store, and I still have my name badge on. Somebody walks up to me and says, hi, Christina Andrews, you work for blank? Well, how do you know me? It's because I have my badge on. But then what I say after that is going to be based upon how I have been coached and how I have been mentored into communicating the specificity of the value props of the organization. I mean, you definitely don't want someone saying, well, tell me a little bit about your referral to admission process. Well, you know what? We have such a staffing crisis right now. I mean, I'm lucky if we can get our home health patients admitted within 2 weeks, right? No. Now, granted, we all have some skeletons in the closets, but that's what we talk about internally. It's not what we talk about in person. So really ensuring that from a coaching and a mentoring perspective, that in-person communication elevates your brand and effectively communicates your brand with good words. Because bad words, for some reason, they're always remembered, right? The good words, sometimes we're lucky if they remember 30% of what we say, right? So again, this particular communication too can also be a really fun workshop, but how to ensure that, from an informal perspective, you're creating a unique branded positive component through the use of good words. And in social media, that floats between the two halves. Once you get it out there, yikes. So the formal and the informal should, in essence, lead to your social, because everything has a very consistent look and feel. All right, so ambassador versus employees. I love this component because this truly is the foundation for growth. There is a difference between an ambassador and an employee. And ambassadors enable organizations to scale their growth. Ambassadors enables organizations to scale their growth. Right now, we are living in an employee-driven market, right? There are plenty of jobs out there. And hiring someone, I mean, I've been there. I've had open nursing positions, open sales, back office, you name it. I have hired because I just needed someone in that seat. And I learned the wrong way that I did not hire for culture. I did not hire the ambassador. I actually hired someone who just truly needed a paycheck. And so that personality wasn't unique for my organization, right? Because it didn't align with the values, the traditions, the beliefs, the way that I wanted the organization to interact within the community, as well as the overall behavior and the attitude. Because we know that all of our surveys can be impacted from the time the phone rings to that last claim that is billed. There are so many touch points of a patient's journey within our organization, right? And so you're saying, okay, Christina, well, how are you tying culture into this? So as you see here, culture is the character, the personality. So when you're interviewing, are you interviewing for unique characteristics for your organization? Or are you just hiring on the job description? Yes, they can do this. Yes, they can do this. They've got experience in here. Check, check, check. Well, that's going to fall underneath the employee. And I'm not saying in any way that hiring employees is a bad thing at all. I just want to create a unique difference here. Because you can train skills, right? We can train skills. And I know a lot of us say, I don't have the time always to train the skill set that I need today. But it can be a difference to your overall market share and market growth, right? If you hire for culture and you're actually asking questions of those key characteristics that create the unique foundation of your brand identity, yes, that might be a longer sales cycle, but ultimately it's going to advance you much further into the future when organizations in this value-based landscape, most likely some are going to be closing their doors. And so what I mean by characteristics, hustle, hunger, humility, problem solver, grit, flexibility, self-motivated. So take the time to think about the key characteristics that your organization needs to ensure success into this ever-changing landscape into the future, and find the time to develop the specificity of interview questions as well as your interview process to ensure that you are connecting the dots to the ambassador versus the employee, because that will enable you to be even much more successful within the employee-driven market today and into the future. So now once you get the employee or the ambassador into your organization, this is really where coaching and mentoring comes into position, right? Because finding that qualified salesperson, it can be harder than ever because of the competition out there. And that, again, this could be a whole nother fun conversation. How are you differentiating your organization through your interview process, in addition to your recruitment process? But I'll stay on track. So finding that qualified individual, hiring them, that it's harder than ever because of the employee-driven market. And so when we think about obtaining managed care contracts, right? Because that's easy, right? Messaging of your value proposition, again, formal, informal, social component. So utilizing the wrong messaging or the frequency of messaging, all of that hinders success and growth. And so providing the adequate type of coaching and mentoring is crucial. And so this is where I wanted to display the concept of teacher versus coach versus manager versus mentoring. And so when we think about each of these specific roles, you think about a teacher for a new hire, right? You have to teach them. You've got to get them on board. You think of a manager as someone who might be underperforming, because you got to kind of wrap your arms around them and provide some coaching and provide some managerial oversight. You think about a mentor, and then immediately what comes to mind is a superstar. So you're putting on multiple different hats when you're coaching and mentoring your new hires. And so I want to leave you with this analogy as it relates to coaching and mentoring. Has anyone ever heard of the draft horse analogy? Somebody might be raising their hand. So this analogy is a unique concept that has been utilized in various contexts, including businesses, leadership, and personal development. It refers to the idea that a team is like a draft horse pulling a load. A draft horse pulling a load. So when we think about it, our team, our organization, growing market share and growing penetration, business development, that can be a very heavy load to carry. So the draft horse represents an individual, right? And the load that they pull represents the goal of our overall growth projections, right? And so although a team of draft horses, a draft horse can pull a heavy load, a team of draft horses can actually pull more. So I'm going to give you some stats here. So a single draft horse can pull a load of around 8,000 to 10,000 pounds, right? While two draft horses can pull anywhere from 16,000 to 20,000 pounds. However, when those two draft horses are trained together with united mission and vision, they become what they call a unicorn. And that unicorn together can pull 24 to 30,000 pounds. That increased pulling power to achieve the overall goal is due to the synchronized effort of being trained, coached, and mentoring, and being consistent with that approach so that load can be shared. So, draft horse analogy. All right, well, obviously, I'm coming up to our hour conversation here, and I have 2 more slides. But I wanted to provide a very articulate component for cultivating a growth mindset. So when you think about cultivating a growth mindset, I would just encourage you to ask yourself, how are you adopting these different specificities within your organization to cultivate that growth mindset? So you have that unicorn, not just one draft horse, not just 2 draft horses, but that unicorn. And so these have been best practices based upon overall experience, within the industry, and working with many organizations such as yourself throughout my tenure. So I would encourage you to take a look at this specific slide and ask, what are we doing well? Or what do we need to ensure that we incorporate within our training and education as it relates to creating that overall growth mindset? And last but not least is achieving the desired results. And this is really where, techniques and concepts, come into play. And so we know that, our clinical and our non-clinical sales teams, they work very autonomously, if I can say that word this afternoon, within the markets that they serve with various referral partners. So ensuring that your team has a very structured sales training with clear expectations, so they are messaging your brand identity, will create success. So this goes back to needs-based selling. You're not selling trinkets. You're not selling donuts. You're not just selling features, but you are equating those features into what's in it for me that benefit your thought leadership. It comes down to the specificity of your activities. So how has that overall research of third-party internal and external data allowed you to tackle territory management, ensuring that every referral partner that you are serving has the right level of frequencies within the week, bi-weekly, or monthly rotation with the specific messaging for that persona. So when you think about territory management, a couple of best practices to keep in mind for your sales rep, your account executive, anywhere from 75 to 100 accounts is really good for their portfolio, but it's to be managed in a specific frequency, to where as a clinical liaison, anywhere from 1 to 5 accounts. So this is really where experience, that quality data, really helps you to ensure that you have the right strategy and messaging to achieve your overall desired results. So with that, thank you very much. I think I am at the top of the hour, or the middle of the hour.
Yeah.
It's 1:30 here on the East Coast. So I thank you all very much for your time, and I will open it up for any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Christina. We do have one in the chat, so let's get to that. But I will say that I'm staying on, and people can stay on for as long as they want to have a group discussion. So the question in the chat is, how do you pinpoint what your niche is? And once you find it, how do you get it out, the message out about that niche to the referral sources?
Yeah, so that's really where I would lean back into that gap analysis. And so when you think about the specificity of your organization, what are you really good at? Are you home health or hospice? Are you good with specific disease processes? Are you your bereavement program, your volunteer program? So when you think about that gap analysis based upon internal data and based upon that third-party data, what have you uncovered, and how does the strengths of your organization fill that gap? As I mentioned on that particular slide, this is really where that intense workshop comes into play, of analyzing that data to make sure that you have either identified the right niche, or you're going to create the right niche. And then once you've identified or created it, it's how you're going to put it into that specific messaging based upon the persona. And the persona can be multiple different entities: granddaughter, the community, the hospital, the physician, the skilled nursing facility. So it's a much more tailored approach based upon that gap analysis and the persona. So that may not have answered your question. I would have to know your unique organization to be able to help kind of align or have more of a strategic conversation. But really, it's about how are you filling that gap based upon your analysis.
I have a small example from our neighbors to the north in New Hampshire. One of the agencies can't compete with the larger agencies that are affiliated with hospital systems. What they do is specialize in second languages,
Wow.
so just not English and not Spanish, just others. So when they go into a community, they say, who is caring for you now? And they talk to that patient about who is caring for them now, and say, okay, how about we train you, hire you? Do you have two friends? And that's how they get their business, but it's also how they get into the community, and they get people who are already in that community. So that's in Derry, New Hampshire, just to our north. But I'm sure there's others that have any other ideas on how you folks are creating not just that niche, but also crafting your brand, talking about. I really appreciated the triple aim. I always like it when we can bring back those marketing terms. If anybody wants to comment or has a question or for Christina, or share what's worked or what challenges you're facing in this realm, welcome to unmute yourself. It's not a terribly large group. We had about 15 in all for the day, so not a good size for a conversation. But to your point, Clayton, yes, I will send the recording link as well as the slides for this presentation at the end of the call.
So I have a question. Is it, so like I'm kind of like catch-all here. I'm agency director, but I'm also the media wizard. I'll go out and change a diaper if I have to, like whatever I need to do. But should we invest in a marketer?
Yes. That's a simple answer. Yes.
So in a perfect world, I wanted to grow like some sort of market and then spend the money on the marketing. So I guess I was trying to do the opposite.
So it's going to allow you to work at the top of your license because you've hired someone very specific for the top of their education, their license. And then that's where you can do the math equation of, okay, so I don't know if you're home health or hospice. Home health. Okay, so how many admissions, Medicare admissions, we'll use the term Medicare, how many Medicare admissions do you need on a monthly basis to offset a quarterly salary? And that's how you back into that goal, because you don't want to just hire someone that you can't offset that cost for. Mm-hmm. You want to hire someone that is an ambassador that you can train and elevate, and they can get the business and offset their overall salary. I would possibly recommend, I'm using the term loosely, possibly, if you hire the marketer, I would not pair that with a compensation plan. I would get to a specific growth percentage before you would even consider the compensation plan. And that's a whole fun other conversation too.
Yeah.
So that kind of dangles the carrot because sales folks, I mean, we like to achieve growth. Yeah. So if you get us there, then what's that next level of recognition? So that would be the marketer's role, to get you to offset his or her cost, then to get you to the point where you can hire the next marketer and then think about that compensation plan. Because most organizations, I mean, there are some, they are offering compensation. So based upon margins.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Christina. It's Betty Karras. I'm at Visiting Nurse Home and Hospice in Rhode Island, and we don't have we piggyback with you guys because we don't have a association. I find that this sale, it's like not like a car. Every 7 years you get a new car. This sale is really unusual, and that we are at this place where we are fighting a competition who has deep ties in the hospital. And these are patients sometimes that we have treated for sometimes 20 years. And we find that we are at the choice is given supposedly, but we find there's some unethical things that happen. But really, when you don't even know you need to know about hospice and home care, how do you get that message out? How do you get that? I think it's a ground assault that it's like person by person by person. I keep going, we go to health fairs and we do all these other things that it's have that story. But it's a really weird sale. I've been in other kinds of marketing in healthcare, but this is a tough one because it comes from, the patient, but it really comes from the social worker, but I have a liaison team and they're amazing. We've actually had almost 35% growth since this time last year in hospice.
That's great.
That I'm floored by how wonderful it's been. This time last year, if you told me that would be the case, most importantly, we're key hires in nurse practitioners who really know the business. But it's that choice. It's that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, because I've also been in those shoes to where I've had to compete with the hospital systems, mm-hmm. right? So the home health and hospice. So that's where the referral report card came to mind. And so the use of a referral report card. So not only is it them giving feedback about my brand, but it was also me giving feedback to them. This is how many referrals that you've provided. This is how quickly we converted them. Here's the unique story of each patient that we served. This is how we managed pain, how we manage, symptoms. So you've got to pull the heartstring component, and then you've got to pull that clinical component. When you get to that level of how you're painting that thought leadership, that value prop, it could differ from the hospital systems, because it's just those referrals are going like this, right? Like this. And even if you could get just a 3% or 5% market share growth, that can also make a big difference for the organization. But I would think about your referral report card. How can you convey your differentiators, your unique brand differently than that hospital referral pattern? That makes sense. But it's consistency too. And so, your team, your liaisons, it's really about that consistent messaging. I don't know if you have access. I mentioned earlier about the business insights, but really looking at that third-party data, because then you can capture more pain points for that hospital system.
Sure.
Right?
So it's something that I am thinking about. So, but it's always, money, et cetera. But with this kind of growth we've had, I think it is what we're missing, is that market intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, once you start to get into there, I mean, it does become like the yellow brick road. It becomes very clear and visible of what needs to be done.
Great. Thank you.
Christina, there's a chat question. Treasures of Hope says, what do you think about contracting a third-party marketing company instead of employing a marketing person? Also want to, Treasures of Hope, I believe, is non-clinical. So if you could answer this towards that private care, private duty, non-clinical market, that would be great.
Okay. So non-clinical, so it's private duty. So you're wanting to contract a third-party marketing company. Okay. So, okay. So
I
in
could be
essence,
wrong.
huh?
I could be wrong. Treasures Hope. I don't remember off the top of my head which line of service they have, but anyway, yes.
So when you ask contracting a third party marketing, would that be the salesperson to go out and to obtain more clients to care for? Or would that be someone who would help you with your branding and messaging, so you have more of that formal branding, so you can focus on community social media, collateral social media? So I guess I just need the distinction for marketing.
Right.
Is it the sales in person, or is it the branding?
I don't know, and it doesn't. Treasures.
So I would say for the sales, I have never recommended contracting a salesperson. Actually, it would be more costly than more effective. However, contracting a consulting company who focuses on marketing and branding is brilliant. And there's multiple consulting companies out there that are very effective at helping organizations position, reinvent, reboot, or elevate their brand. And they can match it to be within your budgetary constraints or just budgetary allotment.
And what if they're remote?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, honestly, I lived in Philadelphia when I was serving East Coast to West Coast. And when the pandemic hit, I did everything at home for 2 years. Prior to that, I'd go on site for a couple of days because I wanted to manage my client's budget very well. So anyhow, I'm sorry. I think I interrupted someone. But
oh no, you're fine. I just wanted, so I actually don't have any experience in the home health care realm. I'm more on the marketing side, but I just wanted to speak on the question on utilizing a marketing agency, because I have worked as an internal marketer for companies, and also I was the main contact point with our various third-party marketing agencies. And I think, to your point, it's definitely helpful to get that brand strategy, and they allow you to see things that you may not see for yourself. And a lot of these companies will even do the the gap analysis for you and say, okay, and they'll even do competitor analysis, because I would receive those, and it's like, okay, so this is what company A, company B, and company C is doing. What can we do differently to draw people to us? And that is, I mean, that goes into like any type of industry, and that would play well to what you guys were discussing with the hospitals. Like, what sets you apart? What value are you providing? What pain point, what solution, how can you help them? It's not a product, it's not a service. It's like, how are you helping them get to whatever point they want to be, whether it's like a service, like a tech service, or what you guys have with that, or it's like a specific product. It all comes back to, how is this helping the person, and how will it grow their business and make things more efficient for them overall?
I emailed Kristen earlier and told her I'd, give her a Starbucks gift card if she layered that in.
Nice.
So.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Christina while we have her attention? I wanted to mention again that Christina is with Axxess, and they are always available to help our agencies, our member agencies. We appreciate their membership, as we appreciate all of your membership. And if you are not a member of the Alliance, please do hit me up, and we'll see if we can't remedy that as well. Any other questions or comments? All right.
Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate the fun conversation thereafter. You all have my email. If I can't help you with a question, I will find someone who can.
Great.
So please feel free to utilize this email for anything. I'm here to support and serve.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next month. I'll send you all the information about the upcoming business development series. Thanks.
All right. Bye, y'all.